Title: Vandals burn veteran's flag until he makes a shocking phone call. The morning began like any other in the quiet town of Pine Valley, Colorado. Jake Thornton, a 65-year-old decorated war veteran, was enjoying his coffee on the porch of his modest wooden home. The American flag, proudly hoisted on the pole in his yard, swayed gently in the crisp January wind. Jake, with his cane by his side and a contemplative gaze, had endured much in his life. The harsh deserts of Afghanistan, endless nights on remote bases, and the difficult transition back to civilian life. To him, that flag was more than a national symbol. It was a living memory of the brothers who never made it home. Meanwhile, 3 young men dressed in dark clothing parked a rusty pickup truck at the corner of the street. Their leader, Travis, a young man with a flame tattoo on his neck, smirked mischievously. "Let's put on a show tonight," he said, holding up a shiny silver lighter. As night fell, the suburban silence was broken by muffled laughter. Jake, already reclined in his chair, was startled by an unusual glow outside his window. Struggling to his feet with his cane, he pulled back the curtain. "My flag!" he exclaimed, seeing the flagpole engulfed in flames. The Vandals laughed and filmed the scene on their phones, shouting insults about how symbols didn't matter in today's world. Jake's breathing quickened. Anger flared in his chest, but he knew he needed to stay calm. He descended the stairs and opened the door. "You think this is funny?" he shouted, his raspy voice cutting through the night. The young men scattered, leaving behind the charred flagpole and the acrid smell of smoke. Back inside, Jake reached for his phone, but instead of dialing the police, as one might expect, he called a number he hadn't used in years. A deep voice answered on the other end. "Major Thornton?" the man asked. Jake replied firmly, "It's time to activate the Sparrow Plan." A brief silence followed, broken by a simple response, "Understood." Mobilizing resources, Jake hung up and glanced at the framed photo of his military unit on the wall. This was a bold move, but what those young men had done wasn't just vandalism. It was an insult to what he had sworn to protect. The next morning, Jake stepped into his yard to clean up the wreckage. Curious neighbors gathered, offering to help, but Jake politely declined. He had something bigger in mind. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled up in front of Jake's house. A tall, muscular man stepped out, carrying a metal case. "Captain Reynolds reporting for duty, sir," he said. Jake nodded in gratitude. "They burned the wrong thing, Reynolds. We need to teach them a lesson, one they'll never forget." The captain gave a faint smile. "Understood. Let's show them you don't mess with a veteran without facing the consequences." Later that night, as Travis and his friends gathered in an abandoned cabin to review the viral video they had posted, a low hum of helicopters filled the air. Bright lights illuminated the area, and voices on megaphones ordered them to come out with their hands up. The young men, confused and terrified, tried to flee, only to realize they were surrounded. Jake emerged from the shadows, dressed in his pristine military uniform, and spoke firmly. "You thought this was a joke? Let's see who's laughing now." The cabin was illuminated by the powerful helicopter lights, and Travis, along with his friends, was being escorted to a makeshift table in the middle of the clearing. Jake, accompanied by Captain Reynolds and 2 other uniformed men, observed the young men with an unyielding gaze. "Do you understand what you've done?" Jake began, his voice low but filled with authority. "Burning a veteran's flag isn't just vandalism. It's an insult to every man and woman who fought to give you the freedom to commit such foolishness." Travis, trying to appear confident, retorted, "Old man, it was just a piece of cloth. You're blowing this out of proportion." Jake leaned over the table, locking eyes with Travis. "You think it's just a piece of cloth? Let me tell you what that piece of cloth means to me. I carried that flag through the desert, watched men die defending it. To me, it's everything. And now, you're going to learn what respect truly means." Jake had something special in mind. He didn't just want to punish the young men. He wanted to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Travis's friends were separated and taken to different stations set up nearby. They were told detailed stories of the sacrifices made by soldiers. One of the girls, Melissa, began crying as she heard about a unit that walked into an ambush to protect civilians. They knew they could die, but did it anyway? She asked, her voice trembling. Jake nodded. And that's why we do what we do. To protect even those who don't understand the value of what they have. Meanwhile, Travis was being pushed to his limits. Reynolds strapped a 65-pound vest onto his back and made him march in circles around the clearing while explaining the physical challenges soldiers face daily. I can't do this anymore, Travis shouted, throwing the vest to the ground. Jake approached him, cold and direct. This is just a fraction of what we faced every day. You're lucky you can stop. They didn't have that choice. The next morning, Jake gathered the young people around the burned flagpole. He held a flag folded into a triangle with the reverence of a father cradling his child. Today, you're going to learn the true importance of this, Jake said as he handed the flag to Travis. You're going to raise it again, this time with respect. The humbled group worked together to clean the pole and set it upright. As the national anthem played, they raised the flag, tears in their eyes and a newfound understanding in their hearts. A ripple effect in Pine Valley. After the incident, something unexpected happened. The young people began looking for ways to make a difference in their community. Travis spearheaded a campaign to restore the town's war memorials, while Melissa started interviewing veterans to preserve their stories. One evening, as Jake sat on his porch, Travis appeared holding a brand new flag. Mr. Thornton, we wanted to give this to you. It's the least we can do. Jake accepted the gift, moved but maintaining his serious demeanor. Remember, respect isn't a one-time act. It's something you build every day. Travis smiled. I know. I'll make sure I never forget it. The story of Jake and the young people spread through Pine Valley. What began as a petty act of vandalism turned into a catalyst for a movement that united the town in ways it hadn't seen in years. The local radio station, Pine Valley Voice, aired interviews with Jake and other veterans, sharing stories of sacrifice, courage, and resilience. People who once hurried past the war memorials now stopped to reflect and pay their respects. Travis and his group were profoundly changed. The video of their initial act, once posted for laughs, was deleted and replaced with a new one. This time, it showcased the restoration of a local memorial narrated by Travis. We made a mistake, he said, but thanks to Mr. Thornton, we've learned that respect is something you earn and practice every day. The video went viral, but for all the right reasons. Jake watched the clip on his phone as Reynolds stood nearby. Looks like you started something big, Major, Reynolds said with a subtle smile. Jake shook his head. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it so they'd never forget that freedom comes at a price. A personal revelation. Despite the positive changes, Jake still carried a silent burden. The memories of friends lost in war. One night, Melissa appeared at his house with a box in her hands. Mr. Thornton, I found this while cleaning out the school's storage shed. I thought you might like to see it. Inside the box were old letters from soldiers who had passed through Pine Valley. Among them was a letter from Jake's best friend, Tommy, dated 1972, shortly before his final mission in Vietnam. Jake held the letter delicately, as if it were made of glass. Reading it brought tears to his eyes, but also a sense of unexpected relief. Tommy had written, If you're reading this, Jake, I want you to know I'm at peace. You've always been my brother, and I know you'll do something great for all of us, even if I'm not there to see it. Melissa, noticing Jake's tears, asked softly, He was important to you, wasn't he? Jake looked at her, his voice heavy with emotion. Tommy was more than a friend. He was the reason I never gave up, even when everything seemed lost. Inspired by the letter, Jake decided to create a memorial not just for the soldiers, but for the lessons they left behind. He rallied the town, gathering volunteers to help. The project drew people of all ages. Children painted stones with messages of gratitude, while elders shared stories and memories. Travis led the creation of a mural, depicting moments of sacrifice and triumph. At the memorial's unveiling, Jake gave a short but powerful speech. This memorial isn't just to remember those who fell. It's to remind us never to take our freedom for granted. And more importantly, that we can turn any mistake into a lesson if we're willing to learn. An unexpected connection. Weeks later, Jake received a mysterious letter in the mail. It was from a man named Peter Wallace, who introduced himself as Tommy's son. He wrote, "My father always spoke of you, Major Thornton. If you're willing, I'd like to meet you and learn more about him." Jake, surprised and touched, replied immediately, arranging to meet at the newly unveiled memorial. When Peter arrived, he carried an old wooden box. "My father left this for you," he said, handing it over. Inside the box was a military insignia, a photo of Jake and Tommy together at the base, and a letter. Tommy's message was clear. "Jake, if you're still here, it means you've done something extraordinary. I always knew you had it in you. Thank you for taking care of all of us." Jake couldn't hold back his tears. He looked at Peter and said, "Your father was an incredible man. And now I understand that he always knew our stories never really end. They live on through those we touch." With the memorial completed and his heart lighter, Jake began traveling to neighboring towns, sharing his experiences and encouraging communities to preserve the stories of their veterans. He was always accompanied by Travis and Melissa, who had become spokespeople for the profound impact respect and education can have on people's lives. Pine Valley became a shining example of unity and learning. Jake, once a lonely veteran, now found himself surrounded by people who admired and respected his work. He had transformed an act of vandalism into an unforgettable lesson for everyone. A national impact. The story of Jake and the impact of his memorial didn't remain confined to Pine Valley. The video Travis and his group had posted, now with millions of views, caught the attention of national media. Newspapers and TV channels highlighted the initiative, calling it a powerful example of how community and education can transform lives. Jake began receiving invitations to speak at schools, civic events, and military organizations. He accepted a few, always bringing Travis and Melissa as living proof of the power of second chances. During a live TV interview, the host asked Major Thornton, "What inspired you to turn an act of vandalism into something awe-inspiring?" Jake, with his calm demeanor, replied, "I've seen enough destruction in my life. Turning something bad into something good is the only way to keep going. Those kids gave me the chance to remind the world that freedom is precious and that when we show respect, we receive respect, recognition from the nation." A few months later, Jake received a call from the Capitol. He was invited to attend a ceremony in Washington, where he would be honored by the President of the United States. Travis, Melissa, and Reynolds accompanied him, each playing key roles in the journey that had begun with a burned flag. The ceremony, held at the Lincoln Memorial, saw the president awarding Jake the National Citizenship Medal. "Major Thornton," the president said, "your story is not just about military service, but about how the values you defended on the battlefield can be taught at home. Your work has reminded us that respect and unity remain the foundation of this nation." The crowd gave a standing ovation, and Travis, visibly moved, murmured, "I never thought I'd be here because of what we did that night. Thank you for not giving up on us, Mr. Thornton." A movement for the future. The ceremony in Washington marked the beginning of something larger. Jake, along with Travis, Melissa, and other veterans, founded an organization called Lessons of Freedom. Its mission was simple: connect veterans with young people of all ages to share stories, promote respect, and preserve history. The organization quickly expanded, establishing educational programs in schools, community workshops, and annual events to honor the sacrifices of those who served the country. Jake became the movement's central figure, but always emphasized that it wasn't about him. "This is about us," he would say in speeches. "All of us have the power to change the course of things, whether on the battlefield or in our communities. All we need is to act with integrity and purpose." Years passed, and Jake remained a constant presence in Pine Valley and across the country. One sunny summer morning, he decided to raise a new flag in his yard, a special flag sent directly from the Capitol as a symbol of his contributions to the nation. Travis, now a father of two and a history teacher at the local school, helped Jake raise the flag. Melissa, who had become a documentary filmmaker telling the stories of veterans across the country, filmed the moment. Jake looked at both of them, proud. "You two are proof that it was all worth it," he said. "This flag is as much for you as it is for me. You've been part of this journey, a legacy remembered. Jake passed away peacefully in his home a few years later, surrounded by friends and family. His funeral drew hundreds of people. During the service, Travis presented Jake's family with a flag from his yard. Mr. Thornton wasn't just a war hero, Travis said in his eulogy. He was a hero to all of us. He taught us that respect isn't given, it's earned, and that any mistake can become a lesson. In Pine Valley, the memorial Jake had helped build was renamed the Major Jake Thornton Memorial for Unity and Respect. Every year, young people from across the country visited the site, learning not just about Jake's life, but about how a community could transform itself. In Melissa's documentary about Jake's life, his final words echoed across the screen. No matter where you come from or what you've done, what matters is what you choose to do from now on. Respect, learn, and always fight for something bigger than yourself. As the screen faded to black, the audience sat in silence. Some cried, others simply reflected, but all left with a renewed sense of purpose, exactly as Jake would have wanted.